Hi, I'm Sabrina Rice, your host of a brand new show here on KBN Television. Here on Paradigm Shift, we will challenge the way that you look at the U.S. and world events and dare you to face the truth. We will also be looking at what the paradigm is that you've all been made to believe and just how we've gotten to this point in history. So stay tuned. We're just moments away. Welcome back to this inaugural episode here on Paradigm Shift. Joining me now is our star of the show, Ray McBerry. Ray is a former Republican candidate for governor of Georgia and is one of the leading spokesmen for constitutional and states' rights issues. He has been seen on Fox News, CNN, HLN, MSNBC, and hundreds of other television and radio shows across the country. So, Ray, you're no newcomer to political hot topic shows, but for those viewers that may be new, give us a little bit about your background in television and politics.
Sure, I'll be glad to. And Sabrina, I want to welcome you to our KBN family here at KBN Television. It's a little unusual for me to be sitting in the interviewee seat instead of the interviewer seat, but we're so excited to have you here and look forward to talking about a lot of exciting things here on the show.
Great.
I've been involved in politics somewhat off and on my entire adult life, going all the way back to when I was in college, just because I guess like many Americans, I'm patriotic and always wanted to have a part in what was going on.
Of course.
And so early on, I got involved helping with other campaigns and things like that. And I've always viewed myself as a traditional views, traditional values, conservative, but not necessarily always Republican. I think sometimes the Republican Party is just as far off track as the Democratic Party is. And so, you know, I have lots of Republican friends, but you know, I have a lot of Democratic friends and a lot of Libertarian and Independents that I share views with too, because I think that we've gotten to the point that, again, in many cases, the Republicans are just as far off in one direction or the other as the Democrats. So, but I believe in those traditional values that I think most Americans share that made America great. Those principles that go back to the Constitution and the Bible, the founding principles of America. But back in 2006, Sonny Perdue was up for re-election. He had just served 4 years as our first Republican governor since Reconstruction in Georgia. And many of us had worked very hard to get Sonny elected because he promised he was going to restore conservative, traditional values. And what we found is that in the 4 years that he was in office, he didn't do any of those things that he promised, as many politicians do. Many of the promises he had made that were pro-life promises or pro-gun promises, Southern heritage, he didn't follow through with any of the things he had said he was going to do. So there were a lot of us that were very disappointed after working so hard to get him elected. So I was approached by some of the pro-life organizations, the Second Amendment organizations, and some of the Southern Heritage organizations, and they said, you know, we'd like for someone to run against Sonny in the Republican primary. He doesn't have any opposition. So we'd like somebody to run against him, but we don't want a career politician to run. We want someone that's a businessman, someone that has public speaking experience, and that will espouse those traditional values. So I reluctantly agreed to do that, literally with only 90 days left before the election. We went down, we qualified with no money in the bank the day that we qualified. But in 90 days' time, getting that message of traditional values out, I still ended up with almost 50,000 votes in the Republican primary.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. It was an eye-opening experience in a number of ways.
I bet.
So, of course, Sonny won his re-election bid. And then 4 years later, 2010, because he had finished his second term, there was no incumbent running. So the field was wide open, both the Republicans and Democrats. So I agreed again to run as a Republican candidate, this time with about a year and a half to campaign full-time. And during that time, the campaign went very well early on. In fact, we had 4 major televised debates with all the Republican candidates present. The first 2 of those debates, the media said that I won both of them. The first one was over at UGA, University of Georgia. Then we had one down in the Macon, Warner Robins area. And because the media came out saying that I got the best response of all the candidates during the debates, my opponents were livid. They were not happy that the media said that. Here was a newcomer. They were all career politicians with millions of dollars in the bank.
Right.
And so they demanded that at the last two major televised debates that they hold straw polls among the live audience and let them vote on who they thought won the debate. Well, I won both of those too. In fact, in one of those, the third debate, there were about 400 people in the live audience, and when the straw poll was taken after the debate, out of the 6 Republicans that were there at the debate, I got more votes than all the others combined.
Wow.
And so we were doing very well, a very strong message of the Constitution, the Bible, states' rights, restoring power to the states and taking it away from the federal government.
Right.
While the message was going very well, though, there were people who did not like that message and did not like that political leaning. And so immediately I began to be attacked by the liberal Atlanta Journal and Constitution and by even Republicans in the Republican Party who did not like an outsider running in their party and doing so well. And I was called every name in the book during the election.
Wow.
In fact, I tell everybody I was called everything but a Baptist deacon. And during that last 90 days, I ended up actually having to sue several people for libel during the after the election was over. Won the case because they had just made up total lies. But you know, once the lies are out there, there's a certain number of people that are going to believe there's truth to them, even if there's not.
Exactly.
And so we didn't do well. I didn't receive as many votes in 2010 as I had in 2006, but we still got the message of states' rights and limited government out there. And it had a great impact on the Tea Party movement in Georgia and many of the other things that are still going on today, I think, because of that message that we took all across the state.
Okay, well that sounds wonderful. I mean, you got your message across. You know, that seems like that was your main priority, as well as implementing other factors into it.
Sure.
Would you ever plan to run again in the future?
Well, that's a good question. As a Christian, I try to be open to whatever the Lord might lead me to do.
Okay.
I do not have any intentions or plans at this particular time, but if the Lord were to impress me, and He would have to really impress me, because I certainly found out why good people rarely get involved in politics.
Right.
But it's something I would consider, but don't have any plans right now.
Well, that's great. And if you do decide and the road leads you that way, we wish you luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, Ray, the name of the show, Paradigm Shift. Can you give us a little bit about what's behind the name and maybe some things that we have to look forward to in the future shows?
Absolutely. I've had a show here on our local station for about 10 years now. In fact, the Georgia First show and its predecessor that became the Georgia First show, it's actually been one of the longest running shows in the Atlanta area for the last decade. And it has always dealt with very hard-hitting political issues and sometimes candidates. But the new show here, Paradigm Shift, is going to be a little different than the Georgia First show in that my desire in this show is to help the viewers at home, the general public, understand that the things that we've been made to believe about how things really are in American history and American politics, it's not always exactly as it seems.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to do my part to, using the knowledge that I've gained, to share with the viewers how some of those things that we perceive to be true are not necessarily the way they are. And I think it's going to open up an opportunity for us to talk about some very interesting events and topics, both from past history and current events too.
Great. Oh, that sounds great. Well, you know what? As a matter of fact, can you tell us a little bit about the paradigm shift that maybe America is experiencing right now, or just give a few examples maybe?
Sure. A paradigm is the way you look at something, and we have been trained some of us would say brainwashed into looking at events and news a certain way. And I would submit to you that what we're going to talk about on this show is going to reveal that many of the things we've been taught are one way or the other are maybe not necessarily the way they appear to be.
Exactly.
And some of those events deal with issues that are current in America today. We're dealing with a lot of racial strife in America today. I think there are some things behind that that affect the picture that's being painted that maybe a lot of folks are not aware of. There's a purpose behind that. If we look at some major events in American history, some of the wars we've been dragged into as a nation really were started by events that didn't actually happen the way that we've been told they happened. And that goes back to the Spanish-American War, World War I with the sinking of the Lusitania, World War II with the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and some more recent events too that I'm looking forward to talking about those actual events, because a lot of the things we're going to talk about are things that are not covered in the history book, but once you know the facts, it helps you to see maybe that there is an intentional direction being pushed on America to take us away from those foundational principles that America was founded upon.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so with that being said, and the way that America perceives things, as far, is that most likely a comparison for the paradigm shift and how we view those things?
It definitely is. And our cameraman's telling us we're about out of time here for this segment. So I'll just kind of wrap it up by saying that the events that we're going to talk about on this show are events that are very much going to be hot topic issues, some of them historical, some of them current events. But you're going to be challenged to look at these events in a totally different way than you ever have before.
Right.
And if we see things for the way they really are, and we understand the direction that we're being led, maybe we can get back to those foundational principles that made America great without having to be dragged down a different road. I hope that we can do that and be a part of the solution that America needs so desperately.
Well, Ray, I'm looking forward to that and your piece on the paradigm shift, and I hope that you guys are enjoying what you're seeing so far, and we look forward to having you back. Welcome back to the Paradigm Shift. Today we're talking with our star of the show, Ray McBerry, who's giving us some thoughtful, insighted questions on what we can learn from different paradigm shifts in America. So far it's been completely interesting, and Ray has given us tons and tons of information so far, not only about himself, but about his views and opinions. So Ray, tell us, going back to what we've already talked about with the paradigm shift and how America perceives things and such, how have we gotten to this point? Has there been any changes, or do you foresee any changes in the future?
Yes. The truth is there is a plan in place to transform America into something totally different than America was in the past, what America was founded upon. And it's an intentional goal of some people to make America totally different. The America that we grew up in, that our parents and our grandparents grew up in, America today no longer resembles that. And it's because there is an intentional effort on the part of a small group of people to change America. The plan that they use is a plan that's been used by the enemies of liberty in many countries for hundreds of years. It's called the Hegelian Dialectic. It was first put into words by the philosopher Hegel, Hegel. But the Hegelian Dialectic basically says that you have a thesis and then an antithesis, and those two are opposites, but they are merged together to form something brand new, which is a synthesis of new ideas. Well, the way that works in history is that those who want to change any country, they either create or use to their advantage crisis situations that come up. Then when the crisis situations come up, they normally offer two different solutions. They'll pretend this solution is on the left, this solution is on the right. But invariably, the population, while they think that we the people are making a choice between these two decisions, what we end up with is always something different than what we had before the crisis started.
Right.
And so no matter whether we choose the quote-unquote liberal choice or the quote-unquote conservative choice, we move further and further down the road in the direction that those that are orchestrating events or using events to their purpose are intending. And invariably in America's history, in the last 150 years, it has always led to less freedom and more government control. We see that in every area of America today, and that's what the Hegelian dialectic is. And that's what this show, The Paradigm Shift, is all about, is helping us to realize how these events are not necessarily the way we've been told they are, so that we don't have to be forced down the ox cart path that the enemies of our liberty want to make us go down.
Absolutely. Now, who do you think is behind this transformation in America?
Well, there are very powerful people. Usually they're people that their names are not in politics, because normally those individuals like to stay behind the scenes. They're very wealthy, very powerful men, and they are the puppet masters. They pull the strings of those that we see out front in the political arena and business arena, but they're not usually the names that are in the headlines. In Europe, it would go all the way back to the Rothschild family, always has its hands in these things. In America, the Rockefeller family, both Republicans and Democrat Rockefellers have had their hands in events. And many of the leading families that are involved in politics today in America, including the Bush family and the Clinton family, appear to be on two different sides of the political spectrum, when in reality they're both working for the very same stated goal, which is globalism, internationalism, the destruction of American sovereignty, and turning America into part of a global community. And so this paradigm that's been created has some people that are intentionally leading us that direction.
Now, what are some more recent events that you feel like maybe have led us to this global agenda or New World Order?
Well, you know, for about a decade before the term New World Order was ever publicly used, people in the liberty movement were saying, you know, there are Republicans and Democrats that are trying to create this one world system, and they're trying to force America to be part of it. And of course, the mainstream media laughed at them for talking about that, and laughed at the phrase New World Order. But then during the first Iraq War in the Gulf, George Bush Sr. came out publicly and said, what we're trying to create is a New World Order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
And of course, he's a Republican, but the Clinton family have been just as involved with creating this New World Order. Obama's been involved with it, so it's not just Republicans or just Democrats. These globalists who are more loyal to their globalist agenda than they are to America are intentionally trying to lead us down this path.
And I definitely agree, Ray. Now, are there any current stories that you can compare to the Hegelian dialectic today in America? I mean, this is an important issue, and you know, we need to be aware of these things here in America for our own safety and peace of mind. What's your view on that?
Well, you're right, and once we understand that we're being intentionally made to perceive things a certain way, hopefully what it does is it takes the blinders off so that when the next news story comes down the pike, that's some great crisis, we don't necessarily automatically accept what the media is telling us is the cause and the result of it. We think for ourselves and we figure out, now, is that really what caused this? And is this really the direction we need to go? Or is someone intentionally trying to make us go this direction when that's not really America's best interest?
Right.
And so that's the goal of course, this show, and helping to take those blinders off. Some of the events that we're dealing with right now, I already mentioned. There are those in our government and in our society that are intentionally trying to foster civil strife between the different races in America. They're trying to foment a race war in America to destroy America. Most black folks and white folks and Hispanic folks, Asian folks that I know, that I'm friends with, that I do business with, we all have the same basic traditional values in our homes and our families. So there are people that are intentionally trying to create this crisis in America because they have their own agenda that they want to change America. Some of the other things that are going on, the global warming crisis. The truth is, there's not a global warming crisis. I know it's been real hot this summer, but it was also real cold and real wet last winter. Much that has to do with the environmental movement is both earth worship that goes back to pagan worship in the Old Testament, but it's very much part of this intentional moving of America in a certain direction.
Right.
The environmental movement is more about government control than it is about saving the earth. And so all of these things, when you understand who the players are and what their goal is, it begins to make a lot more sense.
Okay, well, and you mentioned the Bush family earlier. Now, do you feel like that the Bush family maybe has had a hand in things? I mean, you know.
Definitely so.
Okay.
And again, I am, as far as my voting, I've voted Republican most of the time in my adult life. But as I said at the beginning of this show, it's not because I'm a Republican. It's because most of the time they seem to be in line with traditional conservative family values. But the Bush family would be one good example where the Republican Party is not espousing our traditional American values. The Bush family has been up to its eyeballs in the New World Order or globalism all the way back to World War II. Many people don't know this, and I'm excited about having a show coming up maybe in the next week or so where we'll talk more about it. Grandfather Bush, Prescott Bush, was one of the largest financial backers of Hitler and the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany. In fact, he continued doing business with Hitler and the Nazis after World War II had already started and was still funneling them money even after the U.S. had entered the war and we were sending our servicemen to fight and be killed by the Nazis. They were still doing business with the Germans. Many people are not aware of that. They've also been involved with the creation of Planned Parenthood, even though they're supposedly pro-life, which they're not. And so there are a lot of things behind the Bush family, and the Clintons too, by the way, that are not what we've been led to believe.
Not everything is not what it seems to be,
no,
right, Ray?
No, it's not. That's right.
Well, I hope that you guys enjoyed these fascinating topics today, but this is just one of the many topics that we will explore here on the show Paradigm Shift. I hope that you will find us on our Facebook page at KBN Television. Until then, I'm your host, Sabrina Rice, and I'll see you next time.